dealing with that, and I think the investigation will go forward. But I think what was more interesting was your clip that talked about the question of foreign policy and the big differences between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders on foreign policy and dealing with ISIS. And remember, as this campaign goes forward, I think we out in the grassroots are going to remind every Democratic voter that Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War, sided with George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld, which essentially created ISIS and the crisis we face, whereas Bernie Sanders showed a lot of wisdom. You can see this on YouTube and look at his opposition to the war, his speech on the floor of the Congress. He was then in the House opposing the Iraq War, and every single thing he said about his opposition to the Iraq War came to pass, including foreseeing the creation of something like ISIS, that if you fractured Iraq, what was going to happen, what was going to come in that vacuum. And I think that moment showed that how Bernie Sanders is far more likely to be a much better commander-in-chief and protect the American people than Hillary Clinton. Well, again, let me make the point that Bernie Sanders, in the most important vote, the most consequential vote in foreign policy in the last 15 years, Bernie Sanders had the wisdom to vote against the Iraq War and not believe George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld. And I will ask every single Democratic voter out there, would you have believed Dick Cheney, George Bush, and Donald Rumsfeld? And the answer would probably be no. Hillary Clinton believed them and sided with George Bush. That war devastated Iraq, cost the American people $3 trillion in tax money, not to mention the cost in human life. That alone, in my view, says that Bernie Sanders is far more prepared to be commander-in-chief than Hillary Clinton. And frankly, I think this idea that Hillary Clinton has got foreign policy experience is a myth. She flew around a lot as Secretary of State. It's not clear to me what exactly she accomplished. If you compare that, for example, to the current Secretary, John Kerry, who completed this amazing deal with Iran, and kudos to him and the president. Compare that to what Hillary Clinton accomplished, and it's hard to see any record other than flying around as Secretary of State. I grant that she has enormous amount of celebrity, but in terms of actual accomplishments, it's a big question. Now, on ISIS, this is a very important question. Bernie Sanders has been very, very clear. He believes that the Muslim world, and he praised a number of times the King of Jordan, praised him numerous times in citing the fact that this is really a problem for the Muslim world. And the Muslim world needs to take hold of that with support from the United States in a broad coalition, including Russia. And that goes to the point that Bernie Sanders is very hesitant to put boots on the ground, to risk American lives. Hillary Clinton's, I think, impulse is to favor regime change, and I think it goes back again to her support for the Iraq War. And I think that's a very risky thing for the American people. And I think that difference is going to continue to play out in New Hampshire and Iowa. Well, I think what Bernie wants to do is expand that and make it a much more global coalition, including Russia and some countries that we don't agree with on every issue. His point is that it must be a global coalition, that it can't be that it's the United States that's the policeman of the world. That's got to stop, because it puts at risk not only the lives of our troops, our men and women who go to fight and die in those wars, but it's an enormous cost to the American taxpayer. Money that we should be using to have Medicare for all, lower prescription drugs, pass Family and Medical Leave Act, which apparently Hillary Clinton does not support because she's against the dollar and change increase in taxes that would give family and medical leave. All those things, we should be spending money there, not in fighting wars in the Middle East and creating more opposition and hate towards the United States, which emboldens those kind of radical Islamists like ISIS. Well, the fact is, if you look historically, just 6 months ago, Bernie Sanders was an afterthought. He would have been 3% in the polls. So I don't put too much stock in the polls. I'm out there. I've been in all the 4 early states, traveling in Iowa, Nevada, South Carolina, and now in New Hampshire. And I can tell you the excitement and the energy and the thousands of volunteers, the incredible staff that Bernie has, is going to bring victories in Iowa, New Hampshire, and then forward. Take one instance when the Democratic Party, under the leadership of what I believe is an incompetent Debbie Wasserman Schultz, tried to tilt the scales. In under 24 hours, over 500,000 people, 500,000 people signed petitions demanding that that data be given access back to the Sanders campaign. That is unprecedented. And that would not happen if you did not have this strong support on the part of grassroots, on the part of voters who support the Sanders campaign. I think you will see that in Iowa coming into January. And I believe we're going to win Iowa and New Hampshire. Pleasure to be here.